Dr. Jürgen Schneider. Dr. Schneider serves as the head of the Climate and Environmental Protection section of the Federal Ministry of Climate Protection. He had joined the that's the Umweltbundesamt. He joined the Umweltbundesamt first in 1994, where among his numerous accomplishments, he led the Department of Air Hygiene, headed the Economics and Impact Division, and served as managing director and member of the executive board of the Umweltbundesamt. In addition, Dr. Schneider has been involved in numerous national and international committees, and he is the co-editor of the first Austrian Climate Assessment Report. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Jürgen Schneider.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, thanks a lot for having me here. Thanks a lot for inviting me to share some thoughts on where we stand in the energy transition. Let me start by saying we are living in very interesting times. As you all know, we have gone through numerous crises. We are in the midst of a climate crisis, and we saw some results of that only recently. You might have seen that in Germany there have been terrible floodings, and it's quite clear what climate scientists tell us, that the probability that we have extreme weather events, among these weather events are droughts with wildfires, but also rains and floodings. The probability of such events increases with a heating up of the atmosphere. You might have also learned that during the last 12 months, it seems that we have, according to data from Copernicus, which is some remote sensing, we have passed the 1.5 degrees temperature increase in global average compared to the pre-industrial area. So there are very good reasons to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to zero. The European Union has committed itself in its climate law to become climate neutral by 2050, first climate neutral continent in the world. But as you all know, the climate crisis is not the only crisis we are in. We are just coming out of a corona crisis. And in addition, on the 24th of February in 2022, we had the Russian aggression against the Ukraine, which has led to an energy crisis. And it's tragic to say, but this energy crisis has provided some momentum for the energy transition. Why is that the case? Because we saw that the old promise of a fossil industry, which is we provide you with cheap, secure energy, is no longer valid. In Austria, I can tell you, after the Russian aggression, we had a very high dependency on Russian gas, and we had to implement emergency measures. Among that, we purchased the so-called strategic gas reserve at a cost of 4 billion euros for Austria alone. So it was very, very expensive, caused by the unsecure supply of fossil industry. So what we did, and Austria was not alone, also in Europe, we really boosted the energy transition by a program called Repower EU. We also increased our targets for renewable energy and for energy efficiency as part of a European Green Deal, the Fit for 55 program. And the interesting thing is the success of that, we can already see that. As an example, Austria has now a share of renewables in its electricity production of 87%. So that means the vast majority of our electricity production is renewable. We added only last year 2.5 gigawatts solar to our energy mix, and we are not the only one. So we see energy transition is speeding up, and it's not only for the reason of climate protection, it's also for securing for energy security, but also for economic reasons. I can tell you in the year of 2022, which was the first year of the crisis, the energy crisis, the net Austrian energy bill for fossil fuels, that means what we paid net for import of fossil fuels was 18 billion euros, which is a sum which we cannot afford to pay every year on the long run. So we are stepwise reducing our dependency on imports, and that's true not only, as I said, for Austria, that's true for all European countries. We have really enshrined our way, our pathway for decarbonization. Many of the legal basis which we used to do so is now formally decided on a European level. So it's existing legislation to follow that pathway. You all know we have elections in Europe this week, ending on Sunday. We will get a new European Parliament. We'll get a new Commission with possibly a new president of the Commission. It might be that the current president will also go for a second term, but that's open. Nevertheless, my guess would be that, in particular in the energy part, the core of the European Green Deal will be stable. So there will be no major backlash. Why is that the case? I think it's the case because we start seeing the benefits of the energy transition. We see in times where we have high share of renewable energy in our electricity mix, prices go down. So there's a request by households and by business to stay on the path for energy transition. The situation is a little bit different if you look into another important environmental crisis area, and that's biodiversity. You might have realized there are some very tough discussions now in Europe going on about a piece of legislation called nature restoration regulation, which basically foresees that member states have to support measures to increase or to counteract further loss of biodiversity. And I can tell you here we have very tough discussions with the agricultural sector, with other stakeholders, and I'm not quite sure how a new European Parliament will react on those fields. We have seen recently farmer protests in Brussels, we have seen them in Germany, we have seen them in France, and which is just the results of a societal controversy on how to, if we have enough space for nature to develop. And that's really something where I wouldn't dare to predict how we will proceed in that area after the elections with the new Commission. Nevertheless, as I said, for climate change and for energy transition, I think that will go on. And one of the reasons is, as I told you, what we are seeing the effects of climate change. And here I also I often cite the Global Risk Report. You might know the Global Risk Report, which is published annually by the World Economic Forum. That means an institution which is not susceptible to being too green. And here they ask several hundred world leaders what's the biggest risk for prosperous development, a global prosperous development. And on the mid and long term, the biggest risk is basically climate change. So very good reasons to counteract that. And really the good news, why I'm so optimistic that the energy transition will go on, we see that we have business cases. We have good business cases with the energy transition. The energy transition is an innovation and investment program. As I said, we see in Austria alone billions and billions of investments each and every year. Where do those investments go? We see a large deployment of renewable production. We see a lot of investments into the grid in Austria alone. We have predicted in the next 10 years that we have investments in our electricity grid, in the distribution and the transmission grid, more than 20 billion euros alone. On a European scale, that's several hundred billion euros. And we clearly see that everyone goes in that direction. So, the main message for me, and you hear that is a mixed message. My take on what will going to happen also after the European election would be for the energy transition. I'm quite optimistic that we will further increase and speed up our activities. Of course, we will do that possibly under a little bit different narrative. We will speak more about competitiveness. We will speak about cutting red tape, but nevertheless, it will be about deployment and of renewables and energy transition. As I said, for other areas of a European Green Deal, I think the situation will be much more complex, much more difficult discussions to come. Nevertheless, we also see on a global scale, and we are heading into the next COP, the COP29, that the international community at the COP28 has agreed to triple renewable energy production until the end of a decade. And it's, I think, only today when the International Energy Agency published its 24 energy investment report. And they have calculated that we have annual investment in the energy system of $3 trillion. And of this 3 trillion, about 2 trillion go to renewables. So that's really a very good sign. And we also see that the numbers indicating the investment in renewables have gone up. And the prices, the levelized cost of electricity production, so basically what you pay for 1 kilowatt hour, the cheapest way to produce electricity now is by renewables, and that's true for Africa, that's true for Europe, that's true for America, and that's true for Asia. So, and we also see that a lot of production capacity has been built up, and that will be made available. So, I understand that you have a very interesting panel. So I would, for the moment, leave it with that. Just trying to assure you that we are on, possibly not fast enough for the energy transition, but we are on good track. I'm quite sure we will not lose track. We see in the US, we have elections coming up, but we see the effects of the Inflation Reduction Act. In China, we see the biggest market for renewables and the biggest deployment. So globally, energy transition is the main theme. It will continue. It will also continue after elections. And that's, if we look at the climate crisis, I would say good news. Thanks for your attention.
Great. So I guess I will start by calling up the panelists. First, we have Dimitar Lambrev. Dimitar is a senior portfolio manager of infrastructure investments at Unica Capital Markets. He joined Unica in 2015, has 20 years of experience in private markets, and holds a PhD in finance. Next, we have Roman Rocca. Roman Rocca is the managing owner and founder of R2 Advisors in Hamburg, an investment banking boutique providing asset and corporate finance services with a focus on energy transition and life sciences. Dr. Roca holds a PhD in economics. Next, we have Claudio Gligo. Claudio is the Chief Investment Officer of Bonus Group and has been in that role since 2017 and has responsibility for all assets of Bonus Pensionskasse and Bonus Versorgungs AG. Mr. Gligo is a CFA charter holder and has over 20 years of investment experience. And finally, we have Ulrich Striebel. Dr. Striebel is the CEO of Ökostrom AG. Ökostrom AG is the largest provider of renewable energy a private provider of renewable energy in Austria, and he holds a PhD in business administration and management. Welcome. Thank you all. Why don't I would say let's just jump right in and come up with the first question that I have for you, Dimitar. Maybe just get us started and tell us, what is your understanding of the energy transition and your firm's role in it, and what will be necessary to provide for energy security and to bring the energy mix to net zero?
That's quite a question, Rod, but good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for having me. The understanding of the energy transition, it's a twofold. I think we had quite an unconventional approach of looking into energy transition by investing in the renewable space. We started about 8 years ago supporting investments in PV and solar space, as well as wind, including both onshore, offshore, district heating, obviously waste to energy investments, and the early stage of some of the emerging technologies and subsectors that have also gained speed over the years, which includes electrification of vehicles, biogas and biofuels, investments, as well as quite a significant topic, as mentioned during the clean tech panel, which is namely energy storage and battery storage. That is an imminent need in order to further support the development of renewable energy globally, which is absolutely necessary. If I were just to put the second fold of the story, will be another emerging technologies or investments that are currently still in the work in progress stage, if I may, including hydrogen. I mentioned electrification, but that includes also circular economy, such as waste treatment, and last but not least, I think that's what gets us excited, is getting your hands on a old school utility type of business and trying to support them moving away from the greenhouse emissions and from the reducing their carbon footprint by evolving into carbon capture and those technologies.
Dimitar, are there, in your view, additional or innovative initiatives such as the IRA or European Green Deal, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, or the European Green Deal, that could be used to encourage public support for energy transition or further support the innovation and help developers bring projects or assets to market?
Well, absolutely. I think Dr. Schneider mentioned before that during his keynote that alone the European Energy Deal and the Inflation Reduction Act have brought numerous investment opportunities, which has largely supported the rollout of renewable investments, but not only that, so it's also supported energy efficiency in terms of giving that needed support for manufacturing parts that will be obviously involved in the production of not only wind turbines and solar panels, but also electrolyzers, for example, that are necessary just to fill up basically the gap in the supply chain for multiple technologies. So we do see a mega a tailwind coming from those two initiatives, and that is also obvious in the offerings of a lot of managers that are based overseas, also approaching an LP based in Asia as well as in Europe, which is very encouraging, I have to say.
Okay. Claudio, maybe a question for you. Where are the areas or other areas that you see a need for investment to help move the energy transition forward? And are there incentive mechanisms or policy that you see needing to be directed to really sort of push that investment forward?
So, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Of course, there's many support, and this support is based on taxpayers' money. And I think that this is important for enabling these industries to scale their economics. But of course, in the long run, we want to invest in businesses that work and that have certain payoffs. And that's what we, in the long term, are looking for. And that's why we see both streams, if you want. But the business has to have its payoffs.
Okay. Roman, maybe a question for you now. You've been involved in corporate finance and transaction structuring in the energy transition sector for many years now. What is needed, in your view, to bring some of these more innovative assets into an infrastructure and infra context?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. When we work with innovative clients, these are typically clients who want to produce hydrogen. They want to work with waste heat, capture and store this, or they have innovative green mobility concepts, for example. Those were projects that a couple of years ago would have ended up on corporate balance sheets of the big chemistry companies, energy companies. The sheer amount of money that is needed and also the innovative power of these smaller companies that leads to the need for a project financing approach. Now, we have a couple of big problems in these innovative topics compared to, for example, renewable production. We have a big diversity across technologies. Nobody really knows today which will be the winner in 10 years, if you look at electrolyzers or waste heat capturing. And you don't have a national grid where you have an offtake, which is kind of easy and predictable. So what we try to do is in these projects, we try to isolate and ring-fence the individual risks, and then we try to find the most suitable market participant to take these risks. Those are performance risks that can be taken over by sizable EPCs or operators. Those are offtake risks where you can find, for hydrogen, for example, steel producers or ammonia producers, and so on. And then the remaining risks, in the end, they have to be captured by the capital structure, to some extent by the senior debt, and then it goes down. And as these are usually quite sizable projects, you might slice down the liability side even a bit further. And that is a tedious and a task, because you have to bring this all together, as you know, at one point at financial close, and one of the guys is always running away and having a better idea. But this is what we do, and this is how this should work, yes.
Okay. So feed-in tariffs really led the transition from traditional coal generation to renewable generation. What policies do you see that will be needed, or will policies be needed to help these new technologies, these new innovative energy sources like hydrogen to really take root? Are there any things specifically you're seeing there that is needed?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. It will definitely be needed in many areas. If you compare the price of natural gas, which you can basically extract from the ground and where you have a written-off infrastructure to handle, if you compare that with hydrogen production, where you have to build the energy production because it should be additive and not take away green electricity out of the network, you have to build the electrolyzers and all the infrastructure. That is not competitive. That doesn't work in the market. So you have to think about how to support that. And that is also true for many other areas. Now, due to the lack of a national grid, due to the technical diversity, you will have to find individual models. And that would be probably a full day to talk about each and every model. Just a few remarks, like very principal remarks. You have two ways to support. You can support the balance sheet, which is a CapEx support. You can give grants or cheap lending, or you can support the P&L, which is OpEx support. And if you look at the IRA and at the Green Deal, the IRA is very much OpEx support. It's tax credits. I think 70% or so is tax credits. And in Europe, we tend to have more CapEx support with grants, cheap funding, etc. My clients, they would seek and prefer OpEx support. For two reasons. It's easier, it's faster, it's more direct. And secondly, it enables them to bring in private equity, private debt, private capital, which is not only providing liquidity, but it comes with many other advantages. There's know-how. If you have the right asset manager working with you, there's know-how coming in, there's network coming in. They can help with other issues like offtake or performance. So this is more a very fundamental remark. And then there are many areas where the need for support can be taken by other market participants. First of all, sizable corporates, I think, need to play an important role. Many startups, entrepreneurs have to team up with big corporates to make use of their balance sheets and their performance and operational capacities. I'm very interested to see how insurance will evolve, because these guys are very good in identifying, managing, and diversifying risks and taking risks. Banks and the taxonomy, that will play an important role. So in the end, the non-state support that is also needed will probably come in for two reasons. One is a long-term commercial view. You might, let's say you are a bank and you fund towards a target portfolio which will be very up to date in 8 years. That might really, from a financial point of view, be a very smart decision. But there's also a society element where I might channel, as a bank, for example, private wealth into more into these innovative concepts in order to help the energy transition, help the societal transition. And that goes then through all stakeholders of all parties involved.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Maybe since we have an insurance company present at the panel, that might be
good idea.
Just to jump in maybe on that. I do agree that is OpEx is the easy way to support, but in my opinion, for technologies such as hydrogen, I think it's crucial to have a support in the early stage, which is the CapEx. There's a number of reasons for that. First is you have to have a stable price for those type of investments, or just to have a stable price for hydrogen, for example, or ammonia. This is crucial from a project finance point of view in terms of bankability of the case. And in order to achieve a certain level of bankability, I think what's crucial is to have those offtake agreements, just like you mentioned. We lived in the state of feed-in tariffs for over 10 years, but then gradually the market moved into a corporate offtake agreements, which we all felt comfortable with, but it was a different story 12, 13 years ago. I think the longest PPAs that we could see was about 5 years, and now we're way beyond that point. So back to that, so I think supporting the CapEx will bring this level of comfort in order to make a more viable and more sensible business case for those emerging technologies, in my opinion, thereby getting the necessary contractual framework that is needed, and as well as the scalability of those projects that could be rolled out and largely supported by more private capital and mainly leverage. Otherwise, in my humble opinion, it might be more of a private equity and opportunistic playbook rather than a core, stable, predictable cash flow type of investment, because this is what insurance companies and pension funds tend to like.
Okay. Claudio, maybe another question for you on the topic of mobilizing private capital before we go to Ulrich on another complex of questions. But alternative investment funds include private equity, as Dimitar just mentioned, and hence come with a high-risk characterization when it comes to quantitative limits for investing in those products. How can policy mobilize more capital for investment in such funds?
Yeah, that's exactly what you are saying, especially in Austria, as I know the Austrian regulation for severance payment funds or pension funds very well. Alternative investment funds are connotated with high risk. It could be a venture capital fund or something like that, because in the severance payment field there is no look-through. So you look at the vehicle, indifferent what is in this vehicle. And I think to mobilize capital, it would be very crucial and important to look through and to see. And you could invest as risk-averse investor into infrastructure debt on the highest stage of the ladder, with covenants and good documentation, which is a low-risk strategy. But it's classified because it's in a Luxembourg vehicle or something like that. It's classified the same way like a venture capital strategy. And I think this could be a valid way to be as informed regulator to facilitate the access to capital, because this is a classic asset class we would like to weight higher than we are doing now. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Ulrich, I've been waiting to get to you. You are one of the, the operator of assets here. You're the owner and operator of assets trying to achieve these environmental positive impacts. Do you think we can achieve the goals under the Austrian Renewable Expansion Act by 2020?
Thank you, Roderick, and good evening to all of you. I'm the lucky guy on this panel because I get to spend all the money that the gentleman will raise. I'll spend it on windmills, I'll spend it on photovoltaic power plants, and we have to build lots of them. Just to put this in perspective, because you mentioned the energy acceleration law in Austria, which is a law to decarbonize the electricity that we use today. That's what Jürgen Schneider mentioned in the beginning. We're at 85% of that. That's about 80 terawatt hours, and only 15% are still not renewable. So yes, we'll make that. However, we have two other sectors that we have to completely decarbonize, and that's mobility. That's another 90 terawatt hours, and that's only 10% renewable. So there's 90% of 90 terawatt hours still to go. And then we have the heating sector. So heating up buildings like this and residential homes. And the heating sector has 150 terawatt hours. So that's above 300 terawatt hours that we need renewable. Currently, we're doing about 70. So there's another 200 plus terawatt hours that we need in renewable energy. Now, am I worried that we can not achieve this? No, not really. Because the $2 trillion that Jürgen Schneider mentioned before will be raised and they will be available. What I'm rather worried about is, will we find all the projects that we need to actually do this? So I run around every day out there in the countryside trying to find these projects and trying to get these projects realized. And that is very difficult. And I'll explain later why this is so difficult. On the other hand, and that's why I'm so optimistic, is we've got everything in place. We've got the money, thanks to these gentlemen up here. We've got the technology, we've got the engineers, and we've got the people. So we've got everything that we need. And now I want to come back to the title of this conference when you look up above me. It says, Rethinking Energy in an Era of Shifting Commitments and Uncertain Policies. I think there are no shifting commitments. The commitments are absolutely clear and they have not shifted in the last 20 years. We need to go to net zero. That's what we need to do. That has never shifted. And policies in the energy industry are not uncertain at all. We have the Green Deal, we have the Fit for 55 program, we have the Renewables Acceleration Act in Germany, we have the environmental impact assessment renewal that was just done. So we've got it all. So neither has the goal shifted, nor do we have a lack of laws. We have everything that we need. The question that we need to answer is, why are we not getting it done?
Okay. So the challenges on the Green Deal, and what does that impact have on your company?
The challenge that we have is to make something out of the good frameworks that we have created. So our government here in Austria and the European Commission have created really, really good laws and really good setups for what we need to do. We have the engineers, we have the money. Why is this not working? In Austria especially, we have a very federalistic system. And that's a system that is very difficult if you want to get things done quickly. So we have 9 Bundesländer, and the way of working is different in each of them. So we need more support there. We need more people in the authorities to do the permitting. So the permitting laws are not the problem. You will hear a lot of people saying, oh, we need new laws. No, we don't need new laws. We just need people that execute the laws. And the authorities are understaffed. They need more people. It's very simple. And we need commitment of the people out there. Because no politician and no authority will ever be able to build something or allow something or permit something that the people living in the area do not want. If they do not want it, we will not build it. It's very simple. So what can we do to do that? Is you need to really go out there and give an advantage to people living in these areas. You cannot come like 20 years ago and say, hey, I'm Mr. Ökostrom, and I'll build a windmill in front of your village, and you don't interfere, and I do what I want. This is completely gone. That's why we are a company that has over 3,000 shareholders. And our shareholders are the people that are out there in the countryside where we build our power plants. And that works. And we go out there, we work with the people, we do not do anything against the people, we always try to take them in. We have many ways to do that. Either they buy shares in our company, or they get a special tariff for their residential homes. They get cheaper energy because we can produce in their area, and all of these benefits. When we get the people in the boat, then it's relatively easy to do. And that's something that my industry needs to do. We just need to be more present and integrate people into solving the challenge. And then we'll be able to do it.
Great. So what opportunities will arise for Austria if the country becomes independent in terms of energy policy and supply?
I take this from a macroeconomic perspective, and I take the 2 trillion, I can hardly pronounce it, 2 trillion US dollars that will flow into the energy system worldwide. I want a big portion of the 2 trillion for Austria. And we can get a big portion if we are really committed to invest in that industry. And I think the leading forces in this country are mainly committed. We need to trickle this down over all the levels of policies, the Bundesländer and the municipalities. But if we do that, we can build a huge green tech industry. The windmills that we buy and built, they are done by a Danish company. They're produced in Asia. But the electronics in the windmill come from a company in Vienna, worldwide. And that's an example how much money and how much chance there is if we really invest in this industry. So what's there to gain? It's really a macroeconomic advantage for the Republic of Austria, and that's what I would like to see. I would like to see that commitment. Yes, we'll build windmills. Yes, we build power grids. Yes, we build photovoltaic, because these are going to be the workplaces of the next generation.
Great, thank you. I guess before we turn it over to Q&A, maybe one question, one sort of last question for everyone, and just to sort of get a read on it. In a couple of sentences, maybe each one of you can give us your view on what the biggest challenges will be to accomplish the energy transition in an infrastructure context. So maybe Claudia, we'll start with you. What do you think? What is, in your view, will be the biggest obstacle?
I think one of the biggest issues is grid capacity and grid access, and of course dealing with the intermittence of renewable energy, so storage facilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Roman?
I would say the biggest challenge is to make the new technologies competitive with the existing competition from more fossil sources.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dimitar?
I would have said either one of these two statements, but I have to come up with a third one now. Obviously, the energy transition, it's not a state, it's a journey. It will take a lot of commitments and a lot of support from all stakeholders in order to get towards the net zero, which is, I think, the ultimate goal for all of us. Solving the grid connection problem will definitely enable more renewable energy to be distributed and to remain its competitive state in terms of pricing across the other commodities or energy commodities. I believe the combination of private capital that is still necessary. I think we're still talking about trillions of a gap in terms of trillion for private infrastructure across all the sectors. And I envisage not only the energy transition as a megatrend, but also the remaining other megatrends, which is demographic changes, it's digitalization, immobility, and so on. I think this will be also one of the largest obstacles for the energy transition in the race to net zero.
Okay. Ulrich?
The biggest challenge is to change the narrative. When you look at the TV news at night, or you listen to radio, what will you hear? A crisis here, a crisis there, inflation here, inflation there. So we have a relatively negative approach to things these days, and that has changed over the last 5 years. I found that very different before. We need to go back to narratives that are positive, that show us the way, that lead. And for my industry, I would like to see on the news, directly when there's the weather forecast, I would like to see underneath it, this is how much CO2 we have saved today. Because we have built another windmill, a photovoltaic plant, we have expanded the grid, we've done a new hydro plant. That's what I want to see, and I want to see that people go home and say the weather is good tomorrow, and we have reduced CO2.
Great, thank you. So I guess we can turn it over now to the audience if there are any questions. I mean, I've got a couple of others that I could ask, but I guess it's your turn now.
The energy industry is at a state where innovation is vital to survive as a company. I make a very simple example. We've expanded photovoltaic capacity so drastically that on a May 15th at 12 o'clock in the midday, energy costs 0. So I sell energy for 0. That's not a good business model. So what we need to do is to flexibilize when energy is produced and when energy is consumed. So we do have to do load shifting. This is what we call flexibility management. And it means this energy that's being produced on the 15th of May at 12 o'clock needs to go somewhere. It needs to be stored, or it needs to be exported. Something has happened to it, or we need to convert it into hydrogen or into liquid fuels, whatever. So that is the big innovation that we need to do, and that's early days, frankly. Battery storage is still difficult because you need to move in and out of a battery quick, and that's not so easy as we would believe. Hydrogen is very costly. So that's where we need to put our focus in terms of building the new kind of energy system of the future. So innovation is absolutely key.
No other questions? Okay, go ahead.
For the investors, I would say, if you would not be restricted to regulation to your portfolio management, what would be the area where you would like to invest to drive innovation? So what is, I get your sales hydrogen, but is there anything where you say, I would like to have a deeper dive into it because either it's early stage, whatever, but I'm just limited because of the restrictions I have. What is the area of innovation you think or you would like to have more influence, generally speaking? Tricky questions.
Maybe I'll start. Carbon capturing alongside hydrogen. I think Ulrich mentioned battery storage or energy storage. It's a challenge, but we've seen some encouraging news of long-dated capacity contracts in Asia being signed for battery storage facilities. We're talking about 20 years of capacity payments, which is very, very helpful when building a business case. But carbon capturing, it's something that I will certainly spend more research on because it brings me to that narrative point that you brought up. And as I mentioned it's an exciting point is when you get an old-fashioned facility, steel factory or the likes, and then you convert it into a green piece of infrastructure that is, if not carbon neutral, it's close to it, or an old district heating business that is attached to a wind park and that creates heat that is provided or deriving from renewable resources. And for the heat or for the energy that is that comes on top, there are always going to be a battery storage next to it to save it up.
I'm more an advisor, but if I invest myself, I'm not bound to any regulatory rules, but it's also very, very small compared to what my colleagues here move. I placed a bet 3 years ago on industrial heat recovery, because I think this is an enormous waste, what's happening there. If you produce copper, for example, they put tons of 1,200 degrees hot material, waste material, on the ground and wait for it to cool. And so I invested into a system where you can store up to 1,500 degrees, put it in the container, and then use it somewhere else, either in the process or at another place, because you can ship it short distances. So that would be my bet.
Perhaps I stick with the argument with the AIFs, the classification in a regulatory sense. I think there's something to uncover and to facilitate. And perhaps, but this is more from far away, I think geothermal is perhaps one thing which bears enormous risks for the investors, because you don't you are not sure if you find the heat you are looking for. And there, perhaps some support from the states for the risk you have taken could be a good idea. And I've not seen many geothermal projects within the funds we are looking at, but this could be. And then an opportunity, and in addition to that, for the base load, because geothermal is like a nuclear plant. Yeah.
As an energy investor myself, I would also sort of tend to go in the direction of storage. Whether it's chemical, physical, or battery, I think that is going to be a critical part of the solution. I agree as well that I think battery storage does offer a lot of opportunities, in particular when it comes to ancillary grid services. It's one of the best ways of regulating frequency, et cetera, best and fastest ways. So I'd like to see more done in the battery storage sphere. Question?
To operate the dashboard that I'm looking for? That's a good question, but let's think back to the COVID crisis. We had these dashboards everywhere, on ORF, in the Presse, in Standard, in every newspaper. We had, how many people are, ill at the moment, how many are in the hospital, how many are on intensive care. So I'm quite sure that we would find media that would do that. And I would like to see that. Why is this not happening? Maybe I need to talk to ORF and ask them to do that. So all the media is really who could do that.
I hope everyone is watching ORF though, so.
Okay. The question where? Yep.
Biodiversity is the twin crisis of the carbon crisis. And it's maybe even the crisis that's bigger, that we don't see. Have you noticed that when you drive your car, that there are not so many insects on your windshield as you had when you were a child? It's actually very shocking. And because of not having these insects, we've lost large populations of birds. And with the birds, we lose other species. So, what can we do about it? There is not too much that my industry can actually do. We can do some. We do agri-photovoltaic plants, so that we do dual use. So we space the photovoltaic panels wider, so that the farmers can still grow crops on the same land. That works quite well. We lose about 15% of the energy, but the farmer wins, like 80% of his former production. So that's one way. But in reality, the biodiversity crisis is mainly caused by intensive farming. And that's not my area of expertise, but that's where you should look at when you look at biodiversity. But let's not forget, this is a huge crisis. Much more. I think it's much worse than the carbon crisis.
I'll just add to it, it's a big challenge for us as well. And obviously there's not a silver bullet to solve basically the challenges that we're all facing. I can refer to maybe two instances where it's been addressed within an infrastructure investments, and one is it's an onshore wind park in the Nordics that was affecting the wolf inhabits in the area, and basically the wolf packs were moved into a safety zone, not being affected obviously by the operation of the wind park. That's one example, and the other one that I can think of is, which is quite innovative and quite interesting to me, is creating beehives next to solar panels in Iberia. And I have to say that those bees produce an excellent honey, because I was able to test it afterwards. That's just one way of protecting biodiversity, but obviously we have a bigger fish to fry that hasn't been addressed, and I'm sure it's something that we all have to get our heads around in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you. The biggest angle is farming. I have clients who buy land on a really big scale, so thousands of hectares, and they turn it into bio farming, but in an industrial scale. I don't believe in 50-hectare self-fulfilling small biofarms. It must be done on an industrial scale, and it works. It works economically. You have half the result in terms of mass, but you have twice the price. It's a price we have to pay the same way we pay for more expensive energy for the carbon crisis. We have to pay more money for our food, or change it from meat to more plant-based food, which is way more efficient. And this is what we can do: demand biofood. That also that already has a big impact, because it's not a self-fulfilling move. It's hard work to have a biofarm running with a profit, but it can work if everybody demands it, and prices go in the right direction.
Okay. Any other questions? No other questions? I think that's it. We're over time anyway, so thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists, and yeah, thanks for coming.